The recording has started. We can bring this meeting to order.
Okay, call to order. And do you want to do a roll call? You want to do it or?
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Okay.
Next slide, Missy.
I actually don't believe that slide has been updated. I did forget to do that, so I can do the, oh no, it is updated.
I got it updated. Chair Waddell.
Here.
Vice Chair Jackson. Here. Commissioner Carpenter.
Present.
Commissioner Hanovich. Commissioner Schaus. Does look like he's online. Commissioner Steiner will not be able to join us today, and neither will Commissioner White. Councilmember Harris may join us later. Economic Vitality Director Heidi Hansen. Airport Director Brian Gall.
Present.
Airport Programs Manager Adam Miali.
Present.
Claire Harper is present. Tim Skinner, ARC and Operations Manager.
Present.
And then Ciela Sainer, our Administrative Specialist and our Recording Secretary.
Present.
It looks like we might have lost Commissioner Schaus, which would, oh, maybe he's back.
Yep, he's reconnecting.
Present. I am terribly sorry about that.
No worries. Thanks for rejoining.
All right, well, we will start with a brief welcome to our new commissioners. Glad to have you guys all on board. We do have our two new commissioners, Robert Carpenter as well as Andrew Schaus. Appreciate you guys being on here. As you guys have seen with our roll call there, the Airport Commission consists of 7 appointed community members. It also includes airport staff, the Economic Vitality Director, and a council representative. And just, you can obviously probably read the screen, but I will try to summarize this a little bit. The Airport Commission does meet on the second Thursday of every month, unless there is a cancellation ahead of time. It is also able to be rescheduled depending on circumstance. So far, I don't believe we've ever done that, but it has happened in the past. I think probably before I started, realistically. Meetings are hybrid. As many of you guys are there at the airport, they are held within the conference room. And we also have the availability to join through Teams. As you guys all have received, there's generally an email that gets sent out the week prior. That will include the upcoming agenda for the meeting, as well as the past months or previous meetings minutes. One important thing is that quorum is required for the commission meeting to take place. A quorum is the participation of 4 or more of the commission members to be in attendance, and this could be either in person or virtual. We do request confirmation of attendance by noon on the Tuesday previous to our commission meeting, and that just gives us enough time to make sure that everybody is available. We get the agenda out and published, and if there's a cancellation, we can send out enough notice for people. And lastly, airport staff, we are doing our best to keep track of in-person and virtual attendance. Claire, I believe you're helping with this with your emails and that. But this way, we do ask that everybody take the time to come out in person. It's great to see the airport. It gives you, a good presence to be there and kind of see the facility. And the more, the merrier, of course. And lastly, our Airport Commission agenda will vary month to month, but for the most part, the items that you can consistently see are going to be our staff reports, which includes items like enplanements, fuel flow, tower total operations, those kind of items. It also includes our F report from Wiseman, an update for all of our grants and projects, and a communications and business update. There are additional topics that can be discussed, but we do ask that you send us information, send us topics if you'd like for us to discuss them so that we can add them to our agenda, as it is important to stay on topic. The commission and the public are all welcome to ask questions, but it is important to note that many of these questions may not necessarily be discussed at the moment unless they are part of that agenda item. Any questions or any other items that staff would like to note?
I have a question. We've talked about having the tenants come and present to us a couple times. When is that gonna happen? Like our rental place, like some of the people that were down here, they were gonna come at one point. We talked about that, and we also talked about, like, how does that get worked into the schedule?
So we've got a list going of, so in the to from commissioners to the end, we keep a running list of the items that we want to bring forward to commission.
Oh,
And
okay.
we speak to those folks, and as they have availability from somebody on their staff that's willing to come, we plug them into that. For example, on today's agenda, we've got the air traffic control tower will be presenting an update. So we'll be going through, we kind of have a long list of those, and we try to plug one into every month to see who can come. The rental car entities usually want somebody from their management to come who's not based in Flagstaff, so that's been a little bit of a trickier one to arrange, but we will work on making sure that we can get those folks here if they're willing to come present.
Great. Is the list long? Like,
We probably have a dozen items on the list right now for things that we'd like to present on airport commission meetings.
okay.
But yeah, we're relatively flexible on it. None of those are set in stone, other than when we need votes for certain items. But for the informational items, yeah, we can move things around as long as we can get the presenter to be here on the day of their presentation. We can do what we can to make it happen.
Thank you.
Sure. I think that was it from the conference room, Missy.
Okay, wonderful. Then we'll move on to preliminary business.
How about we have the two new members introduce themselves first, Missy?
Yes, thank you, Tom. Please, whoever wants to start. Robert, are you available?
Yes, I'm available. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. I was just recently appointed. My name is Robert Carpenter, 42 years old. Originally from Chicago, but I lived in Flagstaff on and off about 15 years. I recently retired from the Navy where I did medicine, and very happy to be here in town.
Welcome,
Thank you.
and thank you for your service.
And I'll talk to you about mobile membership here in about 10 minutes, so. Andrew, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi there, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Fantastic. I'm Andrew Schaus, 38, live here in Flagstaff since 2006 from Tucson originally. Recently appointed and yeah, excited to be a part of the commission.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm a business advisor for a company called Thrive up here. We do small business software, marketing services, social media, websites.
Oh, cool. Well, welcome both of you and Robert. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Public comment.
Don't believe we have any public comments today.
Okay. No public comment, so announcements? Any changes to the agenda or anything? Okay, approval of the minutes from September 12th. I believe the staff has recommended approval. Anybody want to put forward a motion to approve the minutes?
Just a reminder for, since we do have some new commissioners, I believe that anyone voting on or making a motion about previous minutes had to have been here for the meeting when the minutes were taken.
Okay, so that's none of us.
Believe we would probably have to table this for next month.
Okay,
I apologize.
no. Okay, we'll table the minute approval till next month. I don't believe we have a city council update.
Doesn't look like she joined us
Yeah.
unless.
Okay, for the new members, we do have a city council member who joins us for the meetings and provides updates of what's going on at the council that may include various announcements, particularly those centered on the airport. Okay, moving on to staff reports. Airport operations update.
So for employments for September, you'll see we had 6,450, which tracks very closely with what we saw this time last year, but a slight, or actually a fairly significant decrease from what we saw in 2021, 2022. This is still in line with our trend that we're seeing, the yellow bars in the graph there from this summer. We did see, so 2021 and 2022, at this time, we still had both American and United at the time. So United left in October, end of October 2022. So that's where we see some of that change from. Also, that was before the regional airline pilot shortage really started going into effect. So us being in a good place comparable last year is promising, especially when you look at the way we trended upwards over the summer months. So May through August, we're all above where we were this time last year. And with the additional flights that we're seeing starting this month in with the new LA route, plus additional flights to Dallas Fort Worth and one additional flight to Phoenix daily, we are expecting to see that increase continuing. It'll probably put us somewhere a little bit ahead of where we were last year by the time we get to the end of the calendar year.
Cool. Okay.
Next slide, Missy.
It's showing total operations, which should be the next one.
Yeah, you're right. So total operations, we had 3,819. So that is also actually a fairly significant increase from where we were this time last year. So over 500 operations more than we had in 2023. We are seeing a kind of a jump in operations this year compared to the last couple. We're fairly close to where we were in 2021, which is one of our higher years. Total operations is one of those kind of challenging things to track industry trends on because there's so many different users. And we might hear a little bit in our tower presentation later, some of that system for tracking those. But we have seen an increase in the private transient aircraft that are visiting our ramp lately. Those things are always kind of tricky. Orville Wiseman can probably provide some more updates if he's able to join us today. But the industry, the flight industry, it has everything to do with flight training, to the weather for our general aviation tenants, to events going on in the local area for those transient aircraft, all the way down to fuel prices. All these things kind of get mixed up and show up in those total operations numbers. But we are seeing that uptick this year, reflecting the busier traffic that we're seeing on the ramp at the moment.
Maybe for our new commissioners, the difference between employments and operations.
Great point. Thanks, Claire. Yeah, so when we talk about employments, that is a paying passenger boarding a commercial flight. So non-revenue passengers don't count towards employments, and we're not counting arriving passengers. So they're just passengers that are coming to the Flagstaff Airport and boarding one of those commercial service flights outbound. Now for total operations, every takeoff and landing counts as an operation. So, if a plane flies in and lands and then takes off again, that's 2 operations. So every operation is 1 for those aircraft takeoffs or landings. Any questions or comments on employments and operations for this month? So parking revenue, this is one of the newer ones that we just started tracking recently. As a reminder, the airport moved to the paid parking system we have in July of last year. So we're just past the 1-year mark there. So you can see September was down a little bit for us compared to this time last year. Again, I think that has to do with the number of commercial flights we have. So September was a fairly low month for us in the number of flights we had on American Airlines. We're expecting that to jump quite a bit in October because we have added a lot of flights this fall. So we don't have a lot of data to go back to. You can see August tracked pretty closely. September, we saw a little bit of a decrease. We'll see where we come out in October, but I do expect us to be a little bit closer to where we were this time last year. As a reminder, that paid parking system was enacted in part to allow us to expand parking capacity here. So for a long time, we had the terminal parking lot, the one directly across the street from the airport terminal. That lot was often at capacity. People were parking in the landscaping. Snow removal was very challenging in the winter months. So We were able to take a loan from the general fund to construct our new economy parking lot. The paid parking system is the mechanism we're using to pay back that loan. So for the near term, the revenue that's generated from that parking system will be used to pay off that new economy parking lot.
Do we see the economy getting used?
We do, but right now I would say it's probably a 2 to 2.5 to 1 split in favor of the terminal lot. The prices for both are relatively low. And without jumping ahead too far, one of the things we're going to talk about in the airport budget discussion later on is some of the fees that we're looking at, because that's something that we will probably be bringing back to the commission at some point to have a discussion about maybe making some changes to that fee structure.
Okay.
What was the total amount of the loan taken from the general fund?
It was just shy of 5 million. Is that
Correct.
correct, Adam?
Correct.
Yeah, so I don't have the exact figure, but I think it's between 4.5 and 5 million.
Thank you.
And that loan both paid for both the construction of the economy parking lot as well as the purchase and installation of the paid parking system. So there are separate contracts. There are actually a few different contracts for those different
And
things.
this is designed for it.
Oh, correct. And the design for the new economy parking lot. So it covered a few different things within that bucket.
And some of that revenue down was when we closed it to repave it too, wasn't it? The main parking
Oh,
lot.
the terminal, yes,
Yeah.
we did see a lull, during that time. That was in June, end of May, early June. We did have to close down the terminal and we used, just the, economy parking lot to do the surface treatments out front.
Which was very much needed.
That's a great point, Chair. One of the challenges we had with the terminal lot, which was 30 years old, was that we were never able to maintain it because it was always full of cars. So constructing the economy lot finally allowed us to shift traffic off of it long enough to maintain the pavement within that terminal lot. So it's in a lot better shape than it was probably for the last decade or so.
Did we get rid of the BMW that was?
It's been relocated.
They're no longer the eyesore that they once were.
Okay.
As much.
Any other questions or discussion on parking? Okay, I think that's all we have for those, Missy.
Then Orville was not able to join us today, but he looks forward to providing a robust update in November.
And for those two new members, Orville Wiseman is the director of the FBO over there. And does a great job of it and has a great first name as a aviator. So, and he's a avid pilot and his team, it's always a miss when he's not here because he has some great, who's been here, who's operating out of here as much as he can, because there are some airplanes that come in with celebrities on board that he's not allowed to discuss. So
Just show pictures.
yeah.
And Chair Waddell, if I could add a little bit of context to that. So for anybody who's unfamiliar, the fixed base operator is sort of like the fueling station at the airport. They do ground handling of aircraft maintenance, provide fueling services. They basically the base for those folks that are transient aircraft that are coming in that are not flying through the terminal. Somebody's not on a commercial flight, generally go through Wiseman Aviation to do so. They also provide those services to our tenants as well, those fueling and maintenance services. They are one of the larger tenants here. They have a ground lease where they lease the space where they operate that business on the airfield. And that's another thing that we'll touch on a little bit in the revenue discussion later on today.
And one of the things they do is he very active in the community for hosting various events in his hangar space out there. So that's great. And what else was I going to say? Oh, for the two new commissioners, get with these guys and have them set up an airport tour for you.
Absolutely.
They'll, the fire department's always fun and seeing what Wiseman does over there, plus just getting a ride around the ramp, see what things are coming. And is the construction of the new, well, you're gonna talk about the equipment sheds, right? Okay. Yeah, we're gonna finally get to park their equipment. If you go over to the fire department, it's crowded over there. So. Okay, Missy, I'm done talking.
Here we go. Mine, my project updates. Oh, for those commissioners, my name's Adam Yelly. I'm the airport's program manager. So I oversee several aspects. One of them is going to be our projects, and I'm just going to give 2 updates today. Make it short, sweet, to the point. Next slide, please. As Chair mentioned, we are working on constructing a new facility here at the airport. This facility is going to be dedicated to our snow removal equipment, operation equipment, as well as some of our maintenance equipment as well. Currently, we have our equipment kind of packed in the fire station pretty good, and in a couple other locations as well. Part of our grant assurance is when we purchase this equipment is we have to keep it under roof. So we're running out of roof space. So we've been working with not only our ADO at the FAA, but as well as ADOT on this project. It's been kind of a long time coming. This particular project is, this particular facility is going to be located between the fire station and our air traffic control tower. Thanks, JD. It's going to be approximately 25,000 square feet. So it's going to have 7 bays. One of those bays is exciting to me. Currently, we do not have a space for our fleet department to do preventative maintenance on our equipment. So when they do it on the ramp, or they have to get creative. And when a part goes bad on one of those pieces of equipment, it's not, you can't just call Joy Towing and to get it over there. So this particular facility is going to have a whole bay dedicated with a crane so they can do preventative maintenance and some other mechanical things that they need to do. So it's exciting. Currently, where we are on the project is we are at that 60% mark with the design. We've solicited for a contractor. We were lucky enough to be allowed through the FAA to move forward with an alternative delivery system, which the airport here has been very, very, very successful on CMAR projects. That's what we went forward with. FAA said we could go ahead and do that. So currently, we have selected our contractor. We've gone before council. Council approved that. We did notify the FAA, and we are working on getting that guaranteed maximum price. That's where we are currently in the process. We met with them yesterday to get a brief look at where we are, where the numbers are kind of coming in. And I'm trying to schedule a meeting with our friends over at the FAA to kind of go over where we are. We do think there's going to be some shortfall there. Prices have gone up. This is going to be a steel structure. So it's not going to be CMU, but it is going to be a steel structure, and it will be all electric. We've identified some funding gaps, and we're going to meet with our ADO to kind of have those conversations, and we think we've got a path forward, but that's ongoing. So once we get a little bit further down the road, I'm looking forward to next month's meeting here, because I'll have a lot more information as to where we are and what our steps forward is going to be. Currently, it's looking pretty good. We've identified some long lead items, and our intention, FAA's intention, ADOT's intention is we continue moving forward. So we're going to keep doing that.
And to piggyback a little bit on what Adam was talking about with the funding for that building. So most capital projects at the airport are funded through a series of federal and state grants. This particular one is going to have no fewer than 6 grants that are going to be combined into that funding. So we have FAA entitlement funding, which is a certain percentage of the funding that we get every year based on our employment as a commercial service airport. We have FAA bipartisan infrastructure law funding, we refer to that as bill funding. So we get basically a similar amount to what we get in our entitlements and FAA bill. And then the third pot of money is FAA discretionary funding, where they rank all the projects in the region, and you show what the guaranteed maximum price is, the price from the contractor, and we ask for them to make up whatever the difference is between the entitlement and bill funding we have with discretionary funding. And then every one of those federal grants has a state matching component. So we have an ADOT grant that goes with those federal grants. And depending on the way those grant allocations go, they could be multiple fiscal years, which would mean another grant. So if we get some discretionary this year and some next year, it'll add 2 more grants for every time. So we'll have no fewer than 6, might be as many as potentially 10 in a case like this for a bigger project.
This is going to be a fairly large project. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. Any questions? Oh, please.
Any impact on operation as a result of the project once it's underway?
As construction commences,
Yes.
as it stands right now, we're working on logistics plans. And currently, we do not see an impact to any operations from the ARF team. As far as our general aviation, we're pretty far removed from that. So I do not envision any impacts.
There may be some impacts to things like the car rental storage lot as they're constructing things. So we might have to work with our tenants in the terminal here. Some of the landside phasing is going to be a part of it for sure. So for example, the service road to the air traffic control tower will be impacted. So we'll need to find a way to make sure that those folks can get to work in the morning and that their car rental place has enough place to park their vehicles. So there might be some detours on the land side, but we're not expecting anything on the air side of the operations.
Great question. Thank you.
Although I guess one other thing to piggyback on that is one of the pieces of equipment that has to be relocated as part of this project is the ASOS, the Automated Surface Observation System. So it's a weather monitoring device owned and operated by the FAA. The communications equipment that serves that device is going to be impacted, and they're looking at relocating that device. So as part of the relocation of that, we might see some temporary taxiway closures as they install the device in their new preferred location, which we're still working out with them. But they will be minimal and won't close the airfield. It'll be a smaller local type closure.
Any further questions? Next slide, please, Missy. The other one, the other project I'd like to just bring up real quick, we had a good conversation last meeting regarding our cafe and our visitor center express. That's going to be in the old cafe area. I do have an update, and I did provide kind of a schematic what it's going to look like. Currently, we've completed our negotiations with the contractor. We've agreed to the price that they provided for those services. Basically, it's going to be to put the glass storefront in and get that space ready for our visitor center friends. Really excited about that. And currently, that particular project is in our procurement and our legal department to generate those contracts. There is an approximate eight-week lead time on that storefront. So once they get all of the parts and pieces and they get all of the equipment, we're looking at a duration of about 3 weeks to get it all installed and up and running for us. We are currently looking at getting out it's an RFP, request for a proposal, correct?
Yep.
For our micro market that we're looking at putting over there. I think a lot of us have traveled to, say, Sky Harbor and other airports where you'll walk up and it's they'll have food items and beverages, and you scan and go yourself. It's going to be that kind of improvement. We think it's going to be very beneficial. We're looking at putting one in this space as well as potentially in the hold area as well, a smaller version of that. We've had a lot of requests for us to expand our vending options, and so this is the direction we're going.
And for the 2 new crew members, can you just tell them the background of why we're not putting a manned restaurant in there?
Sure.
Remember to take that one?
Please.
Sure. So yeah, thank you for the question. So we did at one point, traditionally, there's been a small cafe that has operated in that space. Some of the challenges that we've seen from the businesses who have operated there is that they the hours are challenging, right? So as we I think it's over there.
Oh, yes, it is. Will you plug that in for me? Thank you, Commissioner.
So right now I mentioned we have our current service on American Airlines. Our first departures are typically between 5 and 7 a.m., which means passengers start showing up at the building around 4 a.m. Sometimes even earlier than that on some days. And our last arrivals come in, as late as 10 or 11 o'clock at night at times. So one of the challenges we saw was that the cafe, even though there was a business there, they weren't open every day. And so it was a little bit hard with one space for that in the terminal, passengers would arrive expecting a restaurant to be open, and if they were short-staffed or someone was out sick, they might not be able to get any food or beverage services while they were here. In addition, revenue is one of the things we're going to be talking about, looking at ways to increase our airport revenue. We went out twice for request for proposal for a new cafe to come into that space. We tried to make some improvements for it. We offered up some funding for them, the things that the city could help with to try to upgrade that space a little bit. And we were not able to really receive any responsive bidders. The first RFP, we did get one responsive bidder who withdrew after running the numbers a little bit more in our negotiation phase. The second time we went out to bid, we did not get any successful ones. So we held some debriefs afterward with vendors who we thought might have been interested. And basically they walked us through their costs of operating a restaurant versus the revenue they would expect to make based on the traffic we're seeing in the airport. And it really didn't pencil out. So we heard that from a couple different restaurateurs, which made us think the time to move to something that was staffless, that could be open 24/7, 365 was the way to go for now. In the interim, we have installed some additional vending machines around the terminal. And one of the interesting things is we're making about 4 times more on the vending machines we have now than we did on the rent for the restaurant that was here previously. And those are just very basic vending machines with your typical snack items. So when Adam talks about the upgrade to a micro market, which includes some more fresh food options, things like sandwiches, potentially salads and hot coffee that can be dispensed out of those machines, we expect that number to go up even more.
Hey, Brian, this is Heidi. Can I interject?
Sure, Heidi, go ahead.
Thank you. Chair and Commissioners, Heidi Hansen, Economic Vitality Director. I apologize I'm not on camera. I was having trouble getting onto Teams on my laptop, so I came into the meeting late and I'm on my phone. I just wanted to add that the Micro Visitor Center will actually have visitor center staff that are trained. They actually already, we have a visitor center team over at the train station that will be all managed by that visitor center manager. But what they're going to be doing with that visitor center is also offering grab and go alcoholic beverage items. So we're getting a liquor license. They're getting their liquor handling certifications, things like that as well. So when Brian and all of us talked to restaurant vendors that weren't able to make the numbers work, we also talked to bar owners and they had said the same thing. But we're actually checking all those boxes as well. Just wanted to make sure that if you had a question around the alcohol, that you have an answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi.
Okay, communications and business updates.
Thank you. So as you may have heard, we do begin our service to LAX on Saturday. That's a weekly seasonal service. And when we talk to American, the flight schedule was based on Australian tourism coming to the Grand Canyon, and the times are done through the Qantas flight schedule. Misty, can we have the next slide? So our fall flight schedule, as Brian mentioned, is the fullest we've seen in a few years. Since United left, we do have up to 3 Dallas-Fort Worth flights a day, up to 5 Phoenix flights a day, and then we have the 1 LAX starting. For advertising and marketing, we continue to run ads on the NAPTEP buses. We added a ad specifically for LAX that you may see that articulates through NAU to try to let the students know that we have that LAX option. And then we're continuing to run ads in the Daily Sun as well as the Flagstaff Business News. We were featured an article in the Flagstaff Business News in September about our fall schedule taking off. So make sure to check out that article. And then working on getting some targeting marketing to the LAX market to make sure that that LAX flight is successful. For air service attraction, we're continuing our talks with United. We did connect with them a few weeks ago, and they did let us know that they're waiting to make a decision about coming back to Flagstaff until they hear from the FAA. We applied for a small community air service development program grant. It's called the SCASD grant, and that gives money to smaller communities. We have a letter of support from United that we turned in with our grant application. So that certainly makes a stronger grant application. So we're eager, hopefully the end of November, before the first of the year, we'll hear from the FAA if we were awarded that grant, and then we'll continue our talks with United. We are headed to an air service attraction conference next week. We don't have our schedule yet of what airlines we're meeting with. We should have that any day now. We've requested 6 airlines, so next month we'll come back and provide update on what we learned at that conference. Any questions on marketing, advertising, or air service attraction?
Claire mentioned the Small Community Air Service Development Program grant. Those grants are awarded by the FAA, and they can be used for a variety of different mechanisms to try to help airports like Flagstaff gain that new air service. So in our case, it'd be a mix of minimum revenue guarantee for new routes with new carriers, or advertising support, just trying to make sure those routes are successful. So depending on the air carrier, sometimes they want to see that blend a little bit differently. Some really want the minimum revenue guarantee. Others care more about the advertising support. But the grant, I believe it has a mix of those. Is that correct? Yeah.
Which hubs does United connect with again? Is it Chicago and Denver?
Denver is the one they flew to from here before. Chicago, I believe, hubs as well.
Okay, but it was a Flagstaff Denver connection.
Yeah, and I believe at some point in previous years, maybe a decade or slightly less than that ago, there was some talk about a potential San Francisco route with them at one point. Obviously that never materialized, but that's another one of their hubs that this points north is kind of what's missing on our map right now. You know, we have we're kind of filling in the south pretty well, but we need to try to find a way to make some connections to the north.
And resuming service to Denver is what United is interested in doing.
Okay.
Denver did show up as our #1 market on our passenger demand analysis. So when we did an analysis of where people were coming to and from when they fly to and from Flagstaff, or even visit Flagstaff without, if they bypass the airport and still get here via other mechanisms, Denver showed up as our #1 demand.
And then just another educational point, those flights before United left were a lot of filled, right? I mean,
That's correct.
They were making money.
Yeah, United left, I think it was 47 markets in the summer and fall of 2022 due to their staffing shortage. Regional markets is really what they ended up leading for the most part. Now, so they could kind of borrow those pilots and put them in the larger aircraft and fly from their mainline airports. We did see, I think it was an 83% load factor for the final year they were in operation, which is really stellar by airline standards. So load factor being how many of those seats are filled with those paying passengers. So 83% of their seats were full right up until the time they left Flagstaff.
And just for the 2 new troops, there was a huge shortage of regional pilots, and all the airlines were cutting back on their regional connections. It wasn't just Flagstaff that suffered. So, and it's the first, and I've been around airplanes and pilots for my entire adult life, and it's the first time I've ever seen that kind of recruiting effort to get people to go to flight school. It always was too many pilots for the cockpits, and now it's not enough. So it's kind of an unusual flip.
Part of the reason I think we're seeing that change in the fall flight schedule is the regional carriers are starting to get pilots back. So the pilot shortage on the regional side has eased a little bit. But the big question mark is it seems as though some of that easing is due to some of the delays of the delivery of mainline aircraft. I think some of the aircraft manufacturers have had some delivery delays that are affecting some of the mainline carriers. And as a result of that, some of those pilots that are going through that flight training now are jumping straight into the regional market. So it remains to be seen once we start to see those deliveries of those mainline aircraft come back, or what's going to happen to the regional market again. That's kind of an open question that the industry is watching right now.
It'll be interesting to see, like I saw on Allegiant, we're actually given a program to send pilots through, never flown again, to being a regional pilot, and paying for that, which mind blowing from that perspective. So
and Brian mentioned that United cut out of 44 markets. They rejoined continued service at 23 markets through this year. So that is a sign that it's flying, and it may be our turn to get service back.
Well, I have faith that you will bring them in.
Chair, I have a question. one of the things that I'm hearing from the business community is that we bring in these airlines, they do so great. City supports them in many different ways via all of the ways you just mentioned, advertising and things of that nature. However, when that SCADS grant leaves, so do they, regardless of how successful they are. Is there anything that's in place? I mean, that happened with Horizon, it happened with United, and I know that there were different economic situations happening, but is there any sort of like catch point where that can't happen again, where the SCADS grant expires and then they leave the market? Is that discussion happening at the staff level, or?
We've had discussions about that. The
Yeah.
challenge is that the airline industry is so national and global that if any airport were to put conditions on it, like a minimum amount of time, an airline would have to serve a new market, it would basically be a non-starter, is what we're hearing from them. So if we tried to put anything in a contract that said, we will give you this as long as you stay for X amount of time. I mean, that's included in the grant itself, right? But the grants run fairly short term. So we're talking about 800,000, I think is what we requested. That's maybe 2 to 3 years. So we were beyond the grant when United left us last time by over a year or two. So they extended the grant funding, stayed for a while longer, market conditions changed, and they decided to leave Flagstaff.
Mm-hmm.
If airports have tried to apply anything that would contractually obligate a airline to provide service, they're not going to be interested in coming because they can't guarantee that they're going to have the aircraft or the staff to support it. So that's a little bit of the rock and the hard place that we're in from an industry standpoint. The exception to that are airports that qualify for essential air service grants. That's a different boat. So Prescott, for example, I believe gets an essential air service grant. Fortunately, that program is sunset. Flagstaff was not eligible for it because we did have commercial traffic at the time that grant program started. But there are airports that are still existing under that umbrella. They're provided a larger sum of money by the federal government just to provide that air service at places that wouldn't be able, where the market couldn't support it otherwise. So in those cases, they are obligated to continue providing that service. But for airports like us, it's a little bit more free market driven.
And that comes up, Prescott always comes up right after that. Prescott still has it, so.
It does.
I can't wait for you to announce that next airline, and if we could do something on the advertising realm to kind of communicate that to the community, I think it would be helpful.
Certainly, and talking, so for the SCADG grant, making it of how long you've been here, staying, things like that, for our air carrier incentive policy that we went over many months ago that then went to council, we can certainly bring it back up. We're finalizing it, but for that, they're not eligible for funds on that policy if they've left within 24 months.
Great point.
So it's not like they're coming and going, they would have to be gone for 24 months. And we can bring up that air carrier incentive policy. It's finalized, but we're working on making it pretty. So we'll add that to the next update.
Cool, thanks.
Anything else? Okay. Our special guest.
Well, that's me. Hey, everybody, my name is JD Scarnopoli. I'm the tower manager here at the airport. Only been here since February, took that position in July, once our current manager did leave. I pretty much just threw together a PowerPoint. I wish I saw this one beforehand so I could match the flow. It was probably just as many slides, but they're all very short, mostly just pictures to help out with understanding it. Does anybody know much about air traffic? It's just a really general overview of pretty much what we're doing here.
You kept me safe for 29 years, mostly.
There's it's usually the other pilots cost stuff like that. That's our tower. Nice, good picture. Okay, good. Next slide. So just a quick, we're gonna go over terminal, radar, and en route. Pretty much, we're the smallest level. Radar is gonna be arrival and stuff into en route, where those sectors are covering multiple states for air traffic. Next slide, please. So the basics, I'll just give a general overview of this. We have 3 qualifications: tower controllers, approach controllers, and area, also known as the en route controllers. And each one of those have their own individual breakdowns for different people doing different tasks and responsibilities as well. Next slide, please. So terminal, that's us. That's our airspace. I have a better picture of that. The format on this PowerPoint wouldn't put all in there. Next slide, please.
JD, how far out does that extend at Flagstaff?
I do have that in the next slide, actually. So Flagstaff, here we have two staff positions, our local control and ground control / flight data. Makes sense, local control. That one's talking to people in the air, and ground control, of course, and you want to go in to or from the runway on the ground. And flight data is pretty much going to be the secretary in the tower, handling flight strips, clearances, coordinating with the external facilities and stuff like that. Our airspace, when I show that picture, it's going to be from the surface, so about 7,014 to 9,500 feet MSL. So that's from the sea level. And the services we do provide are visual services, VFR practice approaches, clearance delivery. We do have an automatic terminal information service. And as he had mentioned earlier, the ASOS we move, the automated surface observation system. Oh, and a big thing on the visual services, most towers do have a radar display. I have a picture of one of those in there. We do not, due to, I'm going to assume, FAA budgeting and location of where we're at. They will not afford us one. So everything we do up there, we have 3 pairs of binoculars looking out the windows, no radar, no help from anything like that. Next slide, please. So, like showing the other picture, this is the full class Delta surface area. That's what that stands for. So that's the airspace we're responsible for here in the tower. It is the dotted one with the flat side on the left, circle down to that outstretched leg. So right now the area responsible is 4.3 miles to the north. It's 9.6 miles in that extension down there. And at the end, I do have a note. We're proposing to change this. Should be within the next 8 to 9-ish months. They're pretty slow at getting it done. We will just be a 4.3 mile circle. I could never find out why we have a cutout in the northwest. No one had the answer. The guy who worked in this position for me is here for 28 years. Doesn't remember. And the cutout in the northeast is for a IFR approach that we no longer service to runway 3. Hasn't been serviced for over 10 years, is what I found out. Next slide, please. So this is radar. That's what a radar display, we had one, would look like. Pretty much any of those guys you see like in the movies, they're in the dark rooms with all the screens. That's what they're looking at. So each aircraft has its own little tag. That top thing is its call sign. The bottom left number is going to be the altitude they're at. So the one towards the middle, they're at 6,700 feet. And the bottom right number is their speed in knots, omitting the 0. So they're going 280 knots, which is around 300 miles per hour. Next slide. So since we have no internal radar services that we can provide, we are serviced by P-50 Tracon based out of Phoenix, Sky Harbor. They provide the radar services. Any aircraft receiving air traffic control vectors are vectored up here, and depending on weather, they also issue the visual approaches all the way down to the instrument approaches when the weather is worse, which in the winter is pretty much all instrument approaches coming up here, pretty much one aircraft in, one aircraft out at a time. Next slide, please. P-50, like I said, we're kind of zooming out. So we're just here servicing Flagstaff. P-50 services every one of those airports. Up there, and the bottom ones, those are the uncontrolled. I'm honestly not too familiar with those except for Sedona. Like I said, we're just kind of zooming out. They're in charge of pretty much most of northern Arizona. Next slide. That is their airspace. So that's a breakdown. Each one of those white cutoff sections, there's a different controller that's in charge of that area by themselves. Just kind of showing, it's got the bigger airports, or Sedona, the busier airports, I'd say, that they service from P-50. Next slide. And now we've zoomed all the way out. These are the en route or center controllers. As you can see, we're down there, ZAB, Albuquerque Center. So we got the airport. Phoenix is controlling the northern Arizona, and Albuquerque Center above them is controlling all of the most of Arizona, New Mexico, pieces of Texas as well. Next slide, please. That was pretty much it for the overview of what air traffic is. Just like a quick breakdown. Some stuff about us. So the tower here is owned by the FAA. We are contract controllers with Serco. So we're not technically FAA employees or FAA federal contractors. Tower services. So we have our summer and winter schedule, we call them, from the April to into September. We're up there staffing the tower 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. and October 1st to the end of March, we're up there 7 to 7. And just because we're not here, operations still go on. We do have a system up there where the aircraft relay and talk to each other and just announce their intentions over the radio without us being there. Usually much slower. Aircraft are one in, one out when stuff like that's going on, just because there's no one really controlling them. Next slide, please. And that's it. As I briefly mentioned, the CDSA getting changed to a full circle. And then right now, the FAA has reworked the contract tower program area mapping. And our area is going to include Arizona all the way up to West Virginia. It's pretty much a small cutout through all of the United States. And Circle only has Arizona. So there's a chance that that's going to be up for change come January. We're trying to finalize that before the end of the year. So won't know anything until then. And next slide. That was it.
How many employees do you have? How many controllers out there?
So right now we have 4. The max we can have is 5. I guess I'll bounce back on the operations totals. So in July, when our manager, he was only there for about a month, left after the other one had retired, we were down to 3 controllers with 6 to 9 on the hours. So we were stretched to the FAA maximum. We're not allowed to work more than 10 hours a day or more than 6 days in a row. And so at that time, we did close the local traffic pattern. So I'm not sure that could be contributing. I'm sure it did to the total operations decreasing from July until October 1st. We just got our 4th controller fully certified. So now we're back up to full staffing, running everything as we can. The only reason you have a 5th person is pretty much try not have to work.
Is there an issue getting guys to come up here to Flagstaff to work?
The FAA is in a huge hiring surge, and Flagstaff's pretty expensive for what Serco pays.
Okay. Yep. Haven't heard that one. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah. Thanks, Judy. Any other questions? Anyone from online? Okay. Next slide, please.
All right, back to me. Let's
Go ahead.
So we've talked briefly on some budget items, kind of infiltrates everything we do to some extent. The reason I wanted to add this into our slides today is because we're actually at the beginning of our budget season. So the fiscal year for the city of Flagstaff is July 1st through June 30th. But the budget process starts now. We actually got the email just today that we are kicking off budget for the upcoming fiscal year. So we're starting to work for the next 8 or 9 months on getting our budget ready to start July 1. This is similar to a presentation that you'll see if you ever attend any of the city's budget retreats, which are public. So if anybody ever wants to go, they're generally all-day retreats or sometimes multi-day retreats where the city talks all things budget for all the different divisions and programs in the city. So this is a kind of a high-level overview of some of the airport-specific stuff that is similar to what we share in these budget retreats. Starting with the type of funding that the airport receives. So the airport is an enterprise fund. Color money is the term they always use in the city about where is the dollar, where are the dollars coming from. So in the airport's case, we are an enterprise fund which has the intention of being self-sustaining. So not every enterprise fund always is, but the intention is they're not generally supported through general fund revenues, but rather through revenue sources here at the airport itself. Other groups like water services are a similar thing. So things like user fees, leases, license agreements, that makes up a very large bulk of the airport's budget. And the intent is for that to make up 100% of our budget. Now the airport's not quite there yet. We'll talk about that in the next slide, but that is the intent of those enterprise funds. So as I mentioned, our ongoing revenue sources are those leases for things like our hangars, that are leased to our based aircraft tenants. Also ground leases for operations for things like Wiseman Aviation, the FBO we talked about. Guardian Air Transport has a large facility here. The Arizona Department of Public Safety are some of our larger ground leases. And also those businesses that operate in places like the terminal. So our rental cars that are here in the terminal, the airline themselves, things like that. Plus license agreements. License agreements are more common for some of the other services, say the vending service that Adam talked about in the presentation. That would be more likely to be a license agreement than a lease for the business to operate here at the airport. And then also fees. We talked about parking revenue. For now, the parking revenue is going to pay off the parking lot, but once that is done, it's going to be used for helping fund our ongoing maintenance and capital needs. We have fees. For example, landing fees are charged to some of our commercial carriers, things like that. We also have one-time revenue sources in the form of grants, similar to what we talked about for the snow removal equipment building. Now, those grants are typically for capital improvements or capital purchases. It's very rare for federal or state grants to cover maintenance costs unless they're sort of those very heavy maintenance projects that are verging on a capital project. So a taxiway rehabilitation, for example, might be the type of maintenance that's allowed, but more often than not, it's this more larger, more capital type of expenditures that are covered under revenue rather than our day-to-day operating expenses. So all those revenue sources go into our a mix of different needs. One is our capital improvement plan. So we have a 5-year program that looks at the capital improvement needs for the airport. That's everything from the new snow removal equipment building to purchasing a new fire truck. All those things come out of that capital improvement program, which is developed in conjunction with our airport master plan, which is updated about every 10 years or so. Our last airport master plan was updated in 2018. It is available on our website if anybody would like to ever go read through it. And then annually, we update our airport capital improvement plan. And that program, which we refer to as the ASIP, goes through a review by the FAA and the Arizona Department of Transportation annually. So we basically show the projects we want to do for the next 5 years based on whatever federal or state grant funding may be available. Now, we also use those revenues to cover our maintenance costs, for example, pavement and structures. So from a pavement standpoint, the airport, so the city of Flagstaff has about
700 lane miles?
700 lane miles of pavement. Thanks, Adam. So if you want to think of a lane mile as being a 12-foot wide lane, 1 mile long, that's the city of Flagstaff has a little over 700 of those. Here at the airport, we actually have more than 70 just here on airport property. So we have 10% of what the whole city has from a maintenance standpoint. And only a fraction of the pavement maintenance budget, unfortunately. Similar with structures, we have the terminal building here. We have an airport rescue and firefighting station that is also a part equipment storage building. We have a number of different hangars. The perimeter fence by itself is 5.5 miles long. All those things are covered under the airport's maintenance budget. And that does have some pretty high maintenance needs. Also our operations, so staff, we have those of us that are on the call today. We also have another 10 employees on the airport rescue and firefighting side. They also do airport operations. So that's a little bit of an unusual arrangement, which we'll talk about at a future time, but our staff also does airport operations. So they're staffing those fire engines. They're also out doing some of the things like airfield lighting maintenance, keeping the vegetation under control, so mowing those infields, things like that. We have our programs. So there's a number of different programs that we maintain here at the airport. There's a lot of federally mandated ones. We have various compliance things we need to do. For example, disenfranchised business enterprise, there's an FAA civil rights program. Sure, I'm forgetting. So there's an FAA wildlife hazard management program. We have programs with the TSA. So there's a lot of these different things that we have to continually check these boxes and do a lot of reporting on. That's funded out of our operations budget, plus things like our utilities, our contracts and commodities. So cleaning the terminal, for example, something that's done under contract, purchasing supplies for the airfield, those lights, new windsocks, all those things come out of those commodity type budget items. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the airport fund has some challenges, and that's why I wanted to bring this up now on the front side as we go into the budget process, because these are the things that will be coming back to this commission in the future. So from a funding standpoint, our 5-year plan shows a funding shortfall from the revenue the airport's earning to the expenditures the airport is experiencing. And that is been historically true. I don't know, as far as the records I found can say, the airport has never gotten to be a fully self-sustaining enterprise fund. We've always relied on some support from the general fund. But for the last 4 years, prior to this current fiscal year, we had a very rare federal grant as part of the coronavirus relief program that covered all of our operational expenses, which meant that we didn't rely on the city general fund. What we've seen, though, is that as the years have gone on, 4 years of not relying on any general fund monies, those monies have been allocated elsewhere. So now that grant funding has dried up, it's been a little bit harder for us to try to cover some of our costs through those general fund expenditures. And so our goal is really to get to that point where we are self-sustaining and we're not relying on those budget requests through the general fund. Now, from a maintenance standpoint, I talked about how much pavement we have. We do have increasing needs and costs. The very first part of the budget process is submitting projects to the city's facilities advisory committee, showing the maintenance needs we have. And so Adam has been working on a list of projects that we have. We have over 30 unfunded maintenance projects that are currently on our list right now. Everything from pavement maintenance in the hangar and shade area, things like roof repairs on our hangars, roof repairs to our ARF station. We have pavement. We actually own some of the streets around the airport. Retrofitting our lights from the old low pressure sodiums to new LEDs, all that stuff is covered under those. So we do have that list of infrastructure needs. And some of that is, the facility starting to show its age. Terminal building, for example, is 30+ years old. We did put a lot of maintenance money in it with those federal grants we had, but those needs just keep increasing as stuff gets older. The ARF station is 20 years old. Most of our hangars are 20 to 50+ years old. So they do start to show that age, in addition to the pavement itself. Now, vehicles are similar to that. So I added a picture here showing our 3 ARF vehicles, our aircraft rescue and firefighting. So we are ARF Index B, which means we have to have 2 staffed ARF vehicles 24/7 to maintain that ARF index. Now, that means we have 3 vehicles, so we have 1 in reserve. So if a vehicle ever goes down for maintenance, we're able to pull that reserve truck into service. So the very front one there is our 2018 Rosenbauer Panther. That's our newest piece of equipment. The one next to it is our 2005 Oshkosh Striker. So our second line truck is already approaching 20 years old. Our reserve truck is a 1989 International. So when we start talking about maintenance needs, level of service we can provide, that's kind of indicative of what we're seeing across the airport. Is even our second, primary truck is 20 years old. Our third truck is, considerably older than that. That same is true for our snowplows. We have a fleet of, depending on how you count it, approximately 8 or 10 pieces of snow removal equipment, plus our mowers and sweepers. Average age of those is, essentially 20+ at this time. So maintaining those and keeping in the service to keep the airfield open through the winter is an increasing challenge. From an operations standpoint, I mentioned we have 10 folks on that operations and ARF team. They're split over 3 shifts. So on any given day, we've got 3 ARF staff on shift. We got the 4 of us here in the terminal. So 7 city employees are basically what's out here keeping the airport operating. That's low compared to our peers. So we have pitched some ideas to city leadership about ways we can add a dedicated operations team that can help us increase that level of service. And they've generally been supportive of that idea, but the funding is something we're at this point that we're going to have to try to advocate for, or hopefully find on our own if we get to the point where the airport fund is self-sustaining. I mentioned those federally mandated programs. We're seeing an increase in that. So ARF requirements continually increase. So for a long time, ARF was sort of a job under airport operations. Now it's really a full-time job as a firefighter with airport operations mixed in, right? And that impacts us by how much work we can get done around the airport. I talked about the new civil rights program, the FAS, for example. That's a new program that FAA requirements said we had to start maintaining as of earlier this year, I believe is when that program was implemented. So we have that program in place now, but it's another thing that's taking our staff time. And then we are seeing somewhat reduced level of federal funding support for some of those operations programs. And that's in the form of some of our TSA requirements. So the TSA requires a certain law enforcement presence at the airport. There was a federal program that provided some grant funding to help us offset the cost of having police officers here at the airport. That program was not renewed in the federal legislation this year, so we lost that source of helping offset some of our costs of maintaining some of our law enforcement here at the airport. But, next slide, please, Missy. Okay, all is not lost. We do have some plans on how we're going to be moving forward with addressing this. So grant funding, we talk a lot about grants today and ongoing. State and federal outreach is a big part of it. The city does have a lobbyist at the federal level and a lobbyist at the state level. We work very closely with them. We've sent letters of support and we've talked to our congressional delegation about supporting, say things like the reinstatement of that federal grant program to support our law enforcement cost offset. So we have done that. We've also signed on with some letters. The state aviation fund was actually swept as part of the state budget this year. So they took, I think it was 15 million.
15.
Yeah, so the state budget took 15 million out of the state aviation fund into the state general fund. That affected projects that we can do out here and things we could do here at the airport. So we did sign on to things like a letter that Phoenix Sky Harbor put together advocating for the importance of that fund. We're going to continue to do outreach like that. I talked about parking revenue. For now, I mentioned we're paying off that loan from the general fund, but in the long term, we're hoping that parking revenue is going to be a long, ongoing source of income for us. Proposed development is another big one. So there's a screenshot up here of the Northern Arizona Technology Park. This is just under 32 acres. It's across the street from the airport, but on airport. So this is just across J.W. Powell Boulevard from the airport. We recently entered agreement with a developer who's looking to develop that site. They have a couple of years of deferred rent where they're going to be allowed to pursue development of that area, and then they'll start paying us rent. So it's another one of those long-term solutions. As they get tenants in, we're going to start seeing income from that. Plus, we've seen a lot of demand from private developers for potentially building private hangar space along the airport or other businesses that want to operate here. So we do have a lot of green space that's left sort of around the Westplex. The Westplex is the area where our general aviation hangars are. In the city of Flagstaff, under our procurement rules and the city charter, we do have to do a competitive bid process for all those. So staff is working with our partners elsewhere in the city and procurement and the city attorney's office on developing a request for proposals so we can get those advertised. So hopefully we can get some development in here that will also start to increase the revenue we see for those ground leases. One of the other challenges of that is that at some point, some of the land was rezoned to a zoning that does not allow hangar development, which is inconsistent with our master plan and what we need here. So internally, we're going through a rezoning process to rezone that so we can build hangars on it. We're trying to get that done so it's easier for the developers when they come in and just hit the ground running. So that's something we're working on. And then terminal concessions, I already talked about how much more we made just on vending machines that we did in the restaurant. We're hopeful that once we get that micro market and visitor center installed, we'll start to see an increase from those sales as well. And then user fees is the other big one. So parking costs, traditionally, we're one of the few airports that hasn't, for example, charged for security badging. So that's probably something we're going to be looking at, potential different fees and rate studies, looking at basically our peer airports across the state and across the region to see, you know, what services are other airports using to make sure their budgets are in a good position. Those are things that we're going to be bringing back to this group in future discussions for some feedback on, because when we go to council for adding new fees, we want to be able to talk to them about the outreach we've done, including groups like the Airport Commission. So that's just kind of teeing up a little bit of some of the conversations we're going to be having in the next 6 months to potentially next year. So yeah, those are going to be our next steps as we move forward. Is, you know, we're already working on some rate studies, comparing our fees to other airports, seeing how we kind of line up with those groups. And once we get that data back, we're going to make some proposed solutions to that, and we'll bring that to this group for a discussion.
So if I'm hearing you, we don't get any general fund money, but the money that they had for various organizations around the city, we haven't used for 4 years that we used to have.
That's my understanding, and I don't want to say that we don't get any general fund money,
Okay.
but right now our maintenance needs especially exceed our baseline budget. So we kind of have a base budget is the airport's minimum number to operate at. And so the general fund has been there to support us to make sure that the airport keeps running. You know, we're checking that federal requirements, we're keeping the facility open. Because there's a lot of competing priorities across the city, we haven't been able to get to the point where we can get ahead. So we have received general fund support, not enough to make us start to dig out of the maintenance and operations hole that we've been in a little bit, if that makes sense.
But has the council seen that you guys have been operating under that grant for 4 years and that this train is coming up?
You know, the budget process gets to council at the very end. So it goes through a lot of internal steps first through the city's budgeting cycle. So we did make the case that, you know, this is, and I don't think this is necessarily a new thing. I'm not sure that we received enough money 10 years ago to be really where we wanted to be from a maintenance standpoint, especially either. That, you know, there's a lot of reasons why that list of ongoing maintenance needs is more than 30 items long. And I think that this has been an ongoing challenge at the airport. And honestly, most airports deal with something like this until you get up to somebody like the size of Sky Harbor that can support their other partners within the city. It is not a unique situation for airports to be in.
But I
It
think.
looks like, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, no.
I think Director Hanson may have something her hands.
Here, I
up
have
for
it
a while.
one, this one, when you're.
Hi, if you don't mind me adding, I'd have to go back and look at the 5-year plans, but it has been something that I am talking to our city budget team about, that prior to the CARES funding that we had for 4 years, we did get more general fund assistance. And I scratched my head last fiscal wondering how they thought we were miraculously going to have enough revenues coming in, which is paid parking, when we actually have to pay off a debt service, to make up the difference. So I'm just going to throw this out, and Brian's Brian's tiptoeing, and I appreciate that, Brian. But you as a commission, whenever we see that there is going to be a budget retreat happening, I would love for any of you to show up in support of the airport and our funding.
We definitely are not receiving enough general fund support at this point, and just to do just regular maintenance of the airport throughout the year. And Brian and Adam and Claire and Tim and Missy and everybody are actually doing a really good job with the budget they have. But we just have things that are happening that just makes us go over, quite honestly. And a lot of the programs that Brian has shared are going to take a little bit of time to happen. So I wouldn't mind this year if you all wanted to come and support and share with the council your desire as a commissioner and as maybe a business partner that flies to see the support of the airport. I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
My question was, is there something we can do as a commission to advocate for more general fund dollars to ensure proper funding of the airport? So thank you, Heidi, for what you've just said. Because this is such an essential piece of our region and our economy that the fact that it's been reallocated other places is really concerning. And I would hope that all of us would take Heidi's suggestion to heart, and when those meetings come up, take that 3 minutes to advocate, because this airport is critical. And I just want to, huge kudos to the staff for all of these attempts to diversify funding sources. Like, I feel like you guys have done an amazing job in trying to bring in funding from other areas. But I also feel very strongly that our city needs to support our airport at a proper level. So that's all I have to say.
And it doesn't, right?
Chair Jackson, if I could say one more thing, I mean, I'm sorry, Chair. Commissioner Jackson, I will say that Brian and I are holding monthly airport revenue idea meetings with some of our finance department, our grants department, and so there's a slew of things, some that Brian mentioned today and some that he has yet to mention, because we're still in the very infancy of it. So we're actively looking at ways to become a true enterprise fund, but it's just not going to happen overnight. And so that's why I'm saying that it's okay, you as commissioners coming to council and reminding them that it's not that we're not one day going to hopefully get to be more self-sufficient, but right now we just currently aren't. And we have to run the airport, and other airlines, commercial airlines, find us attractive when we can basically run efficiently. So I just want you to know that's kind of where I'm at with it. And thank you, Brian, for saying it the nice way. I'm just going to tell you straight up that I am okay if I see you at a retreat. Thank you.
Yeah, and it doesn't surprise me to hear that the state pulled money from, because it's not fenced dollars out there, I would imagine, so.
Yeah, so I can't speak for the state level, but on the city level, the dollars that airports make in revenue are protected by federal regulation. So the revenue that we bring in here at the airport, so all the ideas on our solution slide here and the revenue we're already making here are federally required to stay at the airport. So that has not happened at a city level. It's just that our revenue is not quite enough to get us to where we want to be yet. On a state level, I don't think they have those protections.
And do we get, like, for the operations, does the airport collect landing fees for that?
Currently, we only collect landing fees from our signatory carriers. So the airlines and air cargo folks that qualify, that are flying those commercial services that are regularly here.
Okay.
So that is something that we've been looking at, is what other airports have done. It's fairly typical for other airports to charge most commercial aircraft or large private. Generally speaking, the smaller general aviation are exempt by weight. That's not true everywhere. Some airports across the country have also charged them, but yeah, we charge a pretty small subset of our current aircraft operations for landing fees at the moment.
And does Wiseman contribute to our revenue? Do we get, I mean, other than his leasing, or?
Yeah, so our primary, well, I guess I don't have the numbers in front of me, but Wiseman pays a ground lease for the facility, for the land that their building operates on, and we get a fuel flowage fee for every gallon of aviation fuel they sell. So the city gets a percentage of their fuel sales and we get a ground lease. And then per the lease terms, it's pretty typical in airports to own whatever infrastructure a tenant builds at the end of their lease term. So,
Okay.
you know, a company like Wiseman or Guardian or those other folks that have built larger facilities here, at the end of whatever that lease term is, those generally revert to the city.
And if I remember back conversations, aren't our hangar fees and stuff pretty reasonable compared?
We're actually doing a rate study on that right now, so I don't want to speak to that until we
Yeah.
finish that up, because Missy's actually been doing a really good job of talking to airports in the Phoenix metro area, northern Arizona, and then a few similar sized airports in the Four Corners region. So we're trying to kind of cast a wide net and see what folks are charging for those. I don't know where we fall.
We're not gonna get that 35 grand a night stuff that they were getting done.
I don't think we're gonna have Aspen prices in Flagstaff yet. We're not quite there.
We might be soon. I
yeah.
don't know. Okay.
Sure.
Well, yeah, and as far as showing up for things, you know, I'm probably one of the few people on the commission that have nothing to do during the day. So, you know, just keep me in the loop on when you need somebody down there, because I have no problem with public speaking at all. So be happy.
And Chair, you can do, it depends on the retreat, but sometimes you can do what we call virtual public participation. So we'll know that when they send out their retreat agendas, if they're going to allow virtual public participation. And sometimes that's just easier for you to pop on that way, just like some of you are in Teams right now to do that. And I'm also very happy to give you talking points if you'd like those. So again, thank you for your support.
Okay, I've always depended on a professional staff to make me look better in public, so I appreciate that.
Chair, may I make one quick note?
Sure.
Brian had indicated, or in his conversation about our snow operations, and we spoke earlier about our snow removal equipment building. Just to kind of go back to that just a little bit, because there may be a question whether now or later on, when we sized that particular structure, knowing that we have some older equipment and we have some additional needs, how did we size it appropriately? Yes. Currently, we have approximately 8 pieces of equipment. Per our index, we should be around 15. So when we did do the design and we sized the facility, we did it so as for ultimate build out. So
okay. Yeah, I don't envy anybody that's going to be looking for any money, you know, especially now that we have a 2.5% state income tax that I don't know where the revenue is coming from anywhere. So bless you. Have fun. But I really think that, and I know you guys do a good job, but I think getting the city to know that if this isn't here, they're going to lose money all around. You know, every hamburger stand in town, which we probably need another one because I think we only have 27 of them. But everybody's going to lose money if the airport isn't operating. And I just, you know, we're a gateway. You know, maybe we can start stealing some of those airplanes that land up in somewhere else and say, this is the place to come and drive to the canyon, you know. And I know it's going to be a challenge, and I don't envy it, you know, hat in hand going before people, you know. And everything's in flux until after the election. I mean, we don't know who's going to be in charge of what by the time we get there. So,
Chair Woodell, can I add one comment?
You can always add a comment.
I meant to mention this, but you brought up impact to the broader community. So one of our ADOT Aeronautics, we have a good working relationship with our partners at the ADOT Aeronautics team. And one of the things that group does is they try to do things that take the load off of the local airports. They do some pavement maintenance projects that are funded through their group. They match our federal grants. So we basically split the local match with the state on those federal grants. But one of the other things they do is about every 3 to 5 years, they come through and they do an economic impact study. And so I do have the data from the previous one they did, which I think was 2021. which means we're probably coming up due for another one because a lot's changed since then. But I do have some handouts, and I'm pretty sure there's a website that I can point anyone to who's interested about it that does show things like the economic impact of the Flagstaff Airport and really airports across the state on the communities that they serve. So that's one of those things that we're going to try to bring up when we have those conversations with leadership at all levels, federal, state, and local, is showing that, we have operations costs here and we have revenue here, right? But the impact the airport has on the city and the region is much greater than what's going on within the airport property.
And I know that grassroots advocacy works because I do that a lot for the veterans here in the state, but we can work on that too, and I just see it as a huge challenge, and I'd like to, make sure the airport gets, if nothing else, their fair share when the fighting starts down at the city hall. So, okay. I think we're there. Anything else?
I think we can go to the next slide, Missy.
No, that's it.
We have the
Move
two
on.
commissioners slide.
Yes.
So yeah, if anybody has any future agenda topics, this is, we'll do what we can to bring in other speakers or be prepared to speak on other topics if anybody has anything they would like to speak about in the future.
And I got, I'm going to have you come speak to my MOA group, the Officers Association group.
Sure.
They're a bunch of old guys that like to write letters, so we can get you up in front of those and do the same kind of thing. So, okay.
Sounds great.
All right, anything else from any?
Yeah, I just wanted to add before I think the meeting started, Claire had mentioned a party this weekend, an inaugural party. Is that something that as commissioners we should be supporting or?
Well.
A party, it will be like a welcoming with some giveaways, snacks.
Gotcha.
Thank you for flying Flagstaff. I would say no, you're more than welcome to pop by. We'll be doing our arrival party when they come in the cafe space, and that will be at the 12:25. And we'll have a water arch, so that will be cool. The arch trucks will spray the water and welcome in the plane. For the departure, we'll be in the hold room, so that wouldn't be, since you're not flying and you don't have the special pass, we wouldn't be able to have you in there. But if you'd like to join us for the welcoming, you're more than welcome to, but we'll share pictures at our next meeting.
And can you also talk about the quorum policy, that why a lot of us can't be in the same room together unless we're.
So for open meeting law, if it's a group for quorum, so that's 4 or more, we'd have to post it as a public meeting. So when we do tours and such, we would ask for 3 people. If you're not, like we had our 75th anniversary party and more than 4 of you came, but we weren't discussing commission business and you weren't directly interacting. So
I think we did get it posted though, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
So we did,
Okay.
yeah. So for events like that, we can, if we have enough notice, but there's I don't recall what it is. There's a minimum notice requirement per the public meeting law. So
For
sometimes.
sure, but this isn't a meeting for business this weekend, right? It's
But if
celebrate.
4 still want to show up, we would still have to post it as an agenda. But if less than that, absolutely, come on by.
I
Just
think we're here for that, to advocate for the airport, so I would
yeah, just
welcome knowing those opportunities.
if we're gonna do something like that, it's like letting people, let them know who's coming and, so they can say, well, hey, we already got 3 people, so. Okay,
I think we have a hand
Director
up.
has her hand up.
yes, ma'am.
Hi, sorry that I'm so chatty today. I just wanted to let you know that we have a annual tourism and economic vitality annual meeting each year. It's free, paid actually through the bed board and beverage tax, which is coming up for continuation on the ballot on 11/5 FYI. To learn more, you can go to our BBB renewal flagstaff.com website. But if you would like to come to the annual luncheon meeting, you can hear about all the great success the airport and the entire division has had over the past year. We have a great speaker coming And we're also going to be giving out some awards. And if you'd like to come, just RSVP to Carrie Nelson, and I put it in the chat. And for those that are on chat, hopefully Missy could send that out as well. Thank you.
And Heidi will send you all of our commissioners' emails, so an invite can go out.
Perfect.
Okay. I think we're about to the end. Any other commissioners have anything they'd like to add?
I just wanted to say thank you all for having me. It's a very enlightening meeting and looking forward to taking part as this continues into the future.
And we appreciate all that both of you have volunteered to be part of this. It's always a challenge getting commissioners to join up. And I think you'll enjoy it. It's not a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun information, particularly if you like airplanes. So thanks for joining.
Yeah, and I was gonna say I'm definitely happy to make a commitment to be there in person. My apologies, my schedule just got away from me today.
No problem. But like we said, it's fun to see where you work, you know, so. All right. With that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second,
Seconded.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.